Welcome to Biography Central. You are listening to Life of Sri Ramakrishna, a complete biography. Chapter 10, God-intoxicated state. The period subsequent to Sri Ramakrishna's first realization of the Divine Mother was quite naturally replete with thrilling incidents of a spiritual nature. He was just stepping into a new realm, vast and limitless. Every day, he had extraordinary visions, some of them while in the trance state, others in normal consciousness. Though he lived and moved in this world, he belonged in reality to another region and held communion with strange, invisible beings. He was often seen conversing with the stone image of Kali, as if it were fully conscious. To the people of the Kali temple, all this looked like madness pure and simple. His nephew concluded that the great nervous strain of his sadhanas had caused some derangement in the brain, and the physician to the Rajas of Bukailas was consulted. Sri Ramakrishna remained under his treatment for some time, but with no benefit. The physical shock of the first vision of the mother was so great that for a time he lost control over his body. When he was calmer and attempted to conduct the worship of the goddess, it would always take unexpected turns. Strange visions and thoughts flashed before him. Before beginning to meditate, he would say to himself, "I shall sit silent and unmoved like that image of Bhairava." Sri Ramakrishna afterwards described what would happen. "I could distinctly hear strange rattling sounds in my joints from the ankle upwards, as if one were locking them up one by one, so that the body might remain fixed. I remained perforce in that position till the end of the meditation, when the same rattling sounds would again be heard as the joints were unlocked in the reverse orders. Not until this was done could I move or stand up. Sometimes I saw specks of light like a swarm of fireflies before my eyes. At other times a veil of luminous mist would envelop me. Again I would see, with closed as well as open eyes, luminous waves like molten silver pervading everything. Not knowing what these meant or whether they were helpful or detrimental to my spiritual progress, I would lay open my heart to Mother, saying, 'Mother, I don't know what these things are. I am ignorant of mantras and all other things requisite to realization of thee. Teach me, Mother, how to realize thee. Who else can help me? Art thou not my only refuge and guide?' This was my earnest prayer night and day. I used to weep bitterly in the extremity of my grief. Though the young priest was blessed with the vision of his Divine Mother, the goal of his endeavors, yet it did not give him unmixed joy, for it was not continuous. He could get a glimpse of her only in meditation or through some effort. To him this could only mean one thing, that his realizations were not true, else they would surely be without effort and uninterrupted. Could it be that his thirst after God, intense as it was half-hearted? Thoughts such as these made him redouble his efforts and increase his prayers to the Divine Mother. From this time onward, his attitude towards the Mother changed. He became like a little child, confident that his inability to see her whenever he wished was because she, in a playful mood, was purposely hiding herself. He felt that, ere long, she would take him in her arms, that he would no longer be permitted to stray in the labyrinths of the world. He was learning to resign himself to her will, to check the impulses of his own ego, and to let her will direct him. His self-surrender was complete. "O Mother," he would pray day and night, "I have taken refuge in thee. Teach me what to do or say. Thy will, it's paramount everywhere and is for the benefit of thy children. Merge my ego in thy will and make me thy instrument." His actions were much criticized, but what was that to him? Was not the Mother leading him by the hand? This material world was fast losing its reality for him, and the presence of the Divine Mother was the only thing he cared for. As his realization deepened, the vision of the Mother became continuous. Formerly at the time of meditation, it was with difficulty that he gained a glimpse of her beautiful hand, feet, or face. Now he saw her entire form as she spoke to him and directed him in his day's work. Heretofore, while offering food to her, a luminous ray from her eyes would touch it, merely taking its essence. Now he saw her partake of the food even before it was offered in the regular way. Formerly he regarded the stone image of Kali as possessed of consciousness. Now the image disappeared, and in its stead, there stood the living mother herself, smiling and blessing him. I actually felt her breath on my hand, the master used to say later on. At night, when the room was lighted, I never saw her divine form cast any shadow on the walls, even though I looked closely. From my own room, I could hear her going to the upper story of the temple with the delight of a girl, her anklets jingling. To see if I were not mistaken, I would follow and find her standing with flowing hair on the balcony of the first floor, looking either at Calcutta or out over the Ganges. It was thus that Sri Ramakrishna became a God-intoxicated man. The separation between him and the Divine Mother was gradually vanishing, and he was fast attaining to a state of uninterrupted vision of her. And his zeal was commensurate with this great development. His earnestness overcame all obstacles. He forgot all the formalities of the scriptures in his intimate communion with the Mother. He gave up the elaborate forms of prayer with which the novitiate tries to approach God. It became instead a ceaseless outpouring of his heart, in a persistent demand to see her, or a passionate exchange of words with her. He no longer kept himself at a respectful distance from the image, or approached it with a timid heart, or made prostrations as he entered the temple. Who acts thus with his own mother? Is she an object of awe to her son? We cannot establish the sweet filial relation with the Divine Mother, more loving, more affectionate, and more indulgent than any earthly mother can ever be, if we associate the ideas of fear and dreadfulness with her. As the Mother, she is no longer grim and fearful as in her dance of death, but appears to her devotees in a majestic, gracious form full of sweetness and love, showering benediction upon all, and opening up their understanding. This was the Blessed Mother, whom Sri Ramakrishna Deva had realized. Pradai was able to give many interesting details of those days. He used to say, whenever one entered the temple, a thrill would be felt, especially when my uncle was worshipping, as though there were a living presence there. I could never resist the temptation of watching him. His strange manner of worship filled me with wonder and reverence. At the same time, I often questioned his sanity, for his actions were contrary to the injunctions of the Shastras. I was much afraid also of what Rani Rasmani and Mathur Babu would do if the news of his conduct reached them. But Sri Ramakrishna was perfectly insensible to my feelings, and even when told of how strange his actions seemed, was indifferent. Nor could I talk freely as heretofore with him about such matters, for an inexplicable constraint checked me, and I felt a deep gulf between him and me. So I served him as best as I could, fearful lest his extraordinary ways should bring on disaster. Of Sri Ramakrishna's method of worship, he would say, I would notice that my uncle, taking flowers and bay leaves in his hand, touched his own head, chest, in fact the whole body, including the feet, with them, and then offered them at the feet of Kali. At other times, with eyes and chest flushed like a drunkard, he would move with tottering steps from his seat to the throne of the goddess, touch her chin as a sign of endearment, and begin to sing or talk, joke, laugh, or even dance, taking the image by the hand. Sometimes he would approach the throne with a morsel of food in his hand, and putting it to her lips, entreat her to eat. Then would follow this interesting conversation. Well, thou wishest me no, take it. Shall I eat now? Very well, I shall do so. Then he would eat a portion of it and put the remainder to the mouth of the goddess and say, well, I have eaten. Now it is thy turn. One day a cat nearby was mewing as he was making the food offering. He tenderly addressed it, saying, Mother, art thou eager to eat? Here, thou mayst have it, at the same time giving the food to the cat. Sometimes at the end of the evening service, when he had invoked the mother to retire, he would say, Well, thou dost wish me to lie down? Very well, I shall do it, and would lie for some time on the silver bedstead meant for the mother. Again, at the time of worship, he would become so deeply absorbed in meditation that there would be no sign of external consciousness. Every morning, as he picked the flowers for the Divine Mother's garlands, I would see him speaking to, or caressing somebody, or laughing, or indulging in merriment. He never closed his eyes during the night. Whenever I awoke, I found him in exalted mood, talking to someone, singing, or sitting in deep meditation where the punch of a tea is now. All these but confirmed the belief of the local authorities that Sri Ramakrishna must be mad. What they saw amounted to sacrilege. Offering flowers to the Divine Mother after touching one's feet with them, partaking of the food before it was offered to her, lying in the bedstead of the Mother, not to speak of his weeping, laughing, or talking to the image, were proof enough to them of derangement. Though they thought it unwise to have him in the temple, they could do nothing. So they sent a detailed report about these things to Mathur at John Bazaar. Mathur wrote in reply that he would come himself to investigate. Meanwhile, there was to be no interference with Sri Ramakrishna's mode of worship. The officials were convinced that as soon as Mathur saw the eccentricities of the young priest, he would dismiss him summarily. Soon after this, Mathur paid an unexpected visit to the temple, for he feared that some overzealous temple official might maltreat Sri Ramakrishna. He silently entered the Kali temple when Sri Ramakrishna was worshipping and was struck with wonder at what he saw. Sri Ramakrishna was putting his whole soul into the worship with no idea that he was being observed. It did not take Mathur long to decide that Sri Ramakrishna's method of worship was the outcome of a genuine and profound love for the Divine Mother, the like of which is seldom encountered. Convinced that the object of building and maintaining the temple, the manifestation of the Mother herself in the image there, was attained, he returned to his home and sent an order the next day to the temple superintendent that the young priest was to have freedom to worship in any way he chose, and that he was not to be molested. Mention is made in the scriptures of two kinds of devotion. In one, man worships God in accordance with the injunctions laid down in the Shastras. He bathes so many times a day, observes fasts, uses this or that mantra, waves lights in a certain fashion, and lays the greatest stress on the various disciplines prescribed by the scriptures. In the other kind of devotion, one does not observe any such forms. One feels such intimacy with God, is so near to him that one forgets all rules and regulations and acts according to the promptings of the heart. The first kind of devotion, bhakti, is called Vaidhi Bhakti. The second is known as Prema Bhakti. The former is the stepping stone to the latter. One is blessed with Prema Bhakti only when one's devotion to God is mature, the outcome of following the course laid down in the scriptures. It is thus apparent that the phenomenal changes in the mental outlook of Sri Ramakrishna, which the ignorant ascribe to insanity, were due to the development of Prema Bhakti. It was the state of being blasted by an excess of light. This transformation came in such a natural way that Sri Ramakrishna himself was scarcely conscious of it. He felt himself completely at the mercy of a tremendous force. He often wondered at his own conduct and questioned if he were on the right track. Hence, we find him going to the Kali temple and weeping before the Mother, seeking her advice. As we shall see, his trust in her was never betrayed. Owing to the great strain of God-realization, his body became subject to various ailments. One of these was a burning sensation over the entire body, as if his skin had been painted with a caustic. He described it thus, later on. At the time of worship, I tried to think according to the directions of the Shastras that the sinner in me was burnt, and that I was pure and perfect. Who knew then that in every one there actually lies hidden a personification of evil that can be destroyed? I began to feel a burning sensation in my body from the beginning of my sadhana period. What might this be? I thought. Medicines were administered, but all proved futile. One day, I was practicing in the Panchavuti Grove when a red-eyed man of a black color came out of this body, reeling as if drunk, and began to walk about in front of me. Shortly after, there emerged from my body another human figure of a placid mien, wearing the ochre robe and holding a trident in his hand. He attacked the former and killed him. A few days after that vision, I was relieved of the burning sensation which had tormented me for 6 months. As we shall see, he had 2 recurrences of this sensation later. The scriptures dealing with devotion lay down 5 different methods of worship. The first is Shantha, the placid attitude of mind towards the divinity cultivated by certain ascetics and anchoriness who, having learned from the Vedas and other sources that God resides in the heart of everyone, withdraw their senses from the objects of the world and concentrate their mind on Him as the only reality and the innermost self of the universe. These sages live far from the turmoil of the world and lead a simple, retired life, eating roots or fruits. There is generally a tinge of jnanam in this form of worship. The Vedic rishis are examples of this kind of devotion. The next way is called dasya, or the relation of servant to master. Reflection on the complex scheme of the universe naturally leads to the conception of a Lord with infinite power, knowledge, and mercy, governing in accordance with fixed laws. Many desirous of pleasing this God with loyal service give up all considerations of personal comfort for his sake, thinking to establish thus the relationship of master and servant. The devotion of Hanuman for Sri Ramachandra is an example. He is regarded as the model of faithful service. The third way is by Sakya, or friendship. The devotee looks upon his chosen ideal as his dearest friend, feels no constraint in his presence, and is satisfied with simply making his friend happy. Arjuna and the cowherd boys of Vrindavan regarded Krishna thus. The fourth method is known as Vatsalya, or the relationship between parent and child. There is no element of awe in it, for the devotee looks upon the deity as his own child and considers himself stronger than the object of his love. The parents of Sri Krishna are cases in point. Lastly, there is Madhura, or the relationship which exists between those in love. This is the most intense form of attachment, in which the least idea of separation is unbearable. The gopis of Vrindavan are examples. God, in this form of sadhana, is one's sweetheart, a part and parcel, as it were, of one's very being. It is higher than all the foregoing modes of worship, and includes them all. Sri Ramakrishna passed through all these phases of devotion, realizing the same goal through everyone. His Dasyasana, which we shall describe in detail, is particularly interesting in that through his endeavors to enact the role of Hanuman, he was blessed with the vision of Sita, the divine consort of Rama. It was shortly after his vision of Kali that his attention was directed to Rama, the king of Ayodhya, who is regarded as an incarnation of the Lord himself. Convinced that the quickest way to realize him would be to become thoroughly imbued with the spirit of his greatest devotee, Hanuman, he took upon himself the task of reproducing as faithfully as possible Hanuman's attitude towards Rama, that of the faithful servant towards the master. The following are his own words about the process and results of this form of practice. By constant meditation on the glorious character of Hanuman, I totally forgot my own identity. My daily life and style of food came to resemble those of Hanuman. I did not feign them. They came naturally to me. I tied my cloth round the waist, letting a portion of it hang down in the form of a tail, and jumped from place to place instead of walking. I lived on fruits and roots only, and these I preferred to eat without peeling. I passed most of the time on trees, calling out in a solemn voice, Raghuvir. My eyes looked restless like those of a monkey, and most wonderful of all, my coccyx enlarged by about an inch. It gradually resumed its former size after that phase of the mind had passed on the completion of that course of discipline. In short, everything about me was more like a monkey than a human being. At the end of this sadhana, Sri Ramakrishna had a wonderful vision, so exceedingly vivid and so different from any of his previous ones, that it remained long in his memory. Referring to it, the master said, "One day I was seated in the place now known as Panchavati in quite a normal state of mind, not at all entranced, when all of a sudden a luminous female figure of exquisite grace appeared before me. The place was illumined with her luster. I perceived not her alone, but also the trees, the Ganges, and everything. I observed that it was a human figure, being without such divine characteristics as 3 eyes and so on, but such a sublime countenance, expressive of love, sorrow, compassion, and fortitude, is not commonly met with even in goddesses. Slowly she advanced from the north towards me, looking graciously on me all the while. I was amazed and was wondering who she might be, when a monkey with a cry suddenly jumped and sat by her. Then the idea flashed within me that this must be Sita, whose whole life had been centered in Rama, and who had misery only as her lot. In an excess of emotion, I was about to fall at her feet crying, "Mother," when she entered into my body with the significant remark that the smile on her lips she bequeathed unto me. I fell unconscious on the ground, overpowered with emotion. This was the first vision I had with eyes wide open, without meditation on anything. Is it because my first vision of Sita was of her grief-stricken aspect, that my subsequent life contained so much suffering? Who knows? The secret of Sri Ramakrishna's success in these diverse sadhanas. It must be remembered that it takes the ordinary person many lives to achieve the goal of even one form of sadhana. Was, in one word, sincerity, a complete correspondence between thought and action, an entire absence of duplicity. Sri Ramakrishna used to say that for success in any pursuit, one must live exactly up to one's ideal. As we proceed further, we shall see how he carried it out in his own life. In the foregoing pages, we have narrated certain events in the life of Sri Ramakrishna which may seem impossible or supernatural. So difficult are they of explanation from the standpoint of reason or science. But they cannot be as lightly dismissed as that. All saints and sages of every age and clime claim to have had experiences inexplicable by reason, and up to the present at least by science. At the same time, none of them has said that his visions or extraordinary powers were beyond nature or the reach of the rest of mankind. On the contrary, all have invited the rest of the world to test these experiences by experiment along the same lines, to demonstrate for themselves that they are as much within the realm of nature as any of the phenomena of physical science. The only difference is in the degree of subtlety. Physical science deals with the comparatively gross manifestations of nature, while religion, which is philosophy made practical, deals with its finer forms. If after patient and sincere research these transcendental experiences are found to be untrue, then alone we have the right to reject them and have the authority to pronounce them delusions. Here we would like to emphasize the fact that these visions are not in any way necessary for religious progress, nor are they the sine qua non of divine realization. The highest spiritual experiences may, and often do, come unattended by them. At best, they are but milestones on the path of spiritual progress, of importance in proportion as they make a man purer, stronger, more loving, and more self-sacrificing. The right vision is that which transforms a fool into a sage, and where contrary results are produced, we then have only delusion. We have seen that Rani Rasmani was attracted to Sri Ramakrishna, convinced that he had been blessed with the vision of the Divine Mother. She felt that his strange behavior bespoke the fullness of devotion, rather than any mental derangement. One day, she came to Dakshineshwar and, after bathing in the Ganges, entered the temple to worship and meditate. She took a seat near the Divine Mother. Sri Ramakrishna was there, and the Rani, according to her usual custom, requested him to sing. Sri Ramakrishna agreed and filled the place with the ecstasy of his songs. After a time, noticing that the Rani was inattentive, he exclaimed, "That anxiety even here," and slapped her twice. The temple servants were confounded, but none dared to punish the offender. The only two people who were calm were Sri Ramakrishna and Rani Rasmani. His attitude was that of a father chastising an indiscreet child, while the Rani was abashed as if caught in some naughtiness. She was amazed to find that the young priest had the power to perceive that her mind was preoccupied with a pending lawsuit rather than with the songs of devotion. Realizing the gravity of the situation, and apprehensive that the temple staff might assume the right of punishing Sri Ramakrishna, she gravely forbade them to ever mention the incident to him. Rasmani retired to her room. When her attendants complained of Sri Ramakrishna's insolence towards her, she answered, "You do not understand it. The Divine Mother herself punished me and thus illumined my heart." There's a great deal of significance in the above incident. It shows that Sri Ramakrishna considered himself only a tool in the hands of the Divine Mother. Had he had any other idea, he would not have dared to run the risk of jeopardizing his position in the temple by insulting the Rani. It also throws a flood of light on the Rani's mentality, allowing us to see the deep spiritual vein in her nature, which made her recognize the justice of the rebuke and accept it cheerfully. One day about this time, Sri Ramakrishna, in the presence of Mathur, made Hriday his substitute, saying that the Divine Mother would be as well pleased if thenceforth Hriday conducted the worship. Mathur took this to be as the will of the Mother and agreed to it cheerfully. We have already mentioned the Panchavati, the place where Sri Ramakrishna used to meditate. There was a small tank nearby, which was soon after re-excavated, and the surplus earth was utilized in filling up the pits about this place. The Amulika tree was sacrificed to this change. One day, Sri Ramakrishna proposed to Hriday to build a suitable place for his spiritual practices. Hriday agreed and chose a spot near the master's old place of sadhana, where the latter himself planted an aswatha tree, and Hriday planted 4 others. Then a hedge of tulasi and aprajita plants was started, which soon grew thick and tall enough to hide the place from the view of passers-by. One day, some cattle destroyed the hedge and injured the young plants. This made Sri Ramakrishna anxious to protect it against further attacks. It is said that soon after, a strong flood tide in the Ganges brought to the bank near the temple a bundle of wooden posts, with rope, a billhook, and everything necessary for a fence. We have already seen that Mathur always looked after Sri Ramakrishna's comfort, and saw that no harm came to him from people who did not understand his mental state. But even he began to suspect that there might be some nervous trouble. The incident of his slapping Rani Rasmani strengthened this suspicion. So he arranged for Sri Ramakrishna's treatment by an expert physician, Kaviraj Ganga Prasad Sain of Calcutta. The treatment, though continued for some time, brought no relief. Mathur also tried to persuade Sri Ramakrishna to keep his feelings within bounds and to regulate his life in accordance with fixed standards. One day he said, God too must abide by his own laws. He has no power to transcend them. One absurd proposition, replied Sri Ramakrishna. One who has made a law can repeal it at pleasure or make a new law in its place. How can that be? Said Mathur. A plant that produces only red flowers cannot produce flowers of any other color. White, for instance, for such is the law. I should like to see God produce white flowers from a plant bearing only red flowers. That too he can easily do, answered Sri Ramakrishna, for everything depends on his will. Mathur was not convinced. The next day, in the temple garden, Sri Ramakrishna came across a China rose plant with 2 flowers on the same stalk, one of which was red and the other snow white. He broke off the branch to show it to Mathur. As Mathur came in closer touch with Sri Ramakrishna, his doubts gave way to a growing conviction that here was a most remarkable man, a perfected sage, association with whom would confer untold blessings. He was coming under the magic spell of this strange man of realization, and inwardly began to look up to him as a guru. We shall presently see how this feeling of regard deepened into an absolute self-surrender at the feet of the humble priest of Dakshineshwar. We shall conclude the account of this brilliant period in the life of Sri Ramakrishna by mentioning a few more incidents which happened during these 4 years of his sadhana, between 1853-1858. Though Sri Ramakrishna, during this period of divine madness, could not bear association with worldly men, he did not shun the companionship of devotees. On the contrary, he was eager to be with them and join in their worship and kirtan. Now and then he would go to Baranagore to visit the Dasha Mahavidya, or to Kalighat to worship the Divine Mother, and participated almost every year in the greatest religious festivity of Panahati, a few miles from Dakshineshwar. It was in this latter place that Vaishnav Charan, son of Utsalinda Goswami and a great Vaishnava devotee of the time, first met Sri Ramakrishna. It was in the year 1858. Sri Ramakrishna, attended by Hriday, had gone to witness the festival and was seated in the temple of Mani Mohan Sain when Vaishnav Charan arrived and immediately recognized Sri Ramakrishna as a man of rare spirituality. After a little while, he offered 5 rupees to Sri Ramakrishna, who refused to accept them. Vaishnav Charan, being insistent, Sri Ramakrishna told Hriday to accept the money and to buy mangoes and other things for offering with it. Then they all began to sing kirtan, encircling Sri Ramakrishna, who fell into a trance. Vaishnava-charan tried to make Sri Ramakrishna eat of the offerings, but he could not swallow. The remainder was eaten by all as sacred prasad. On the way back to Calcutta, Vaishnava-charan, who had ascertained where Sri Ramakrishna lived, stopped at Dakshineshwar to see him, but he was not there. A few years later, he met Sri Ramakrishna again, and, as we shall see, under exceedingly interesting circumstances. At this time, Sri Ramakrishna had to undergo an ordeal which Rani Rosmani and Mathur engineered rather thoughtlessly, although in good faith. They were greatly concerned at his failing health and thought that deviation from the rigid observance of continence might be beneficial. They knew that any such proposal would be rejected with scorn, so they contrived to tempt him secretly. Accordingly, they hired 2 women of ill fame to enter the room at Dakshineshwar and tempt this child of the Divine Mother. The moment he saw them, with all earnestness he sought shelter at the feet of the Mother. Hearing the name of Mother, the women were abashed. Another day, Mathur took Sri Ramakrishna for a drive to Calcutta and stopped at a house in Maichu Bazaar, where several beautiful girls were waiting. He retired, leaving Sri Ramakrishna alone with them. Instantly, Sri Ramakrishna became like a child, lost outward consciousness in repeating the name of Mother, and remained in that marvelous state, the very embodiment of purity and self-control. The effect of this on the minds of the girls was electric. They realized their folly, and afraid of the consequences of trying to tempt a saint, they implored his forgiveness. When Mathur, attracted by the noise, entered the room, he was struck dumb at this astonishing proof of Sri Ramakrishna's mastery over his passions. And as he hastened from the scene, he met with a volley of reproaches from the infuriated agents of his design. He was smitten with shame, and, needless to say, his regard for Sri Ramakrishna was redoubled. I hope you like this chapter. We need volunteers and sponsors to create content with even better quality and with more variety. If you wish to join this initiative as a volunteer or sponsor, please click the links given in description below. To help us reach more viewers, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Biography Central. Thank you for your time. It means a lot. Namaste.